Except there was a few of them left when it came time to occupy the promised land. And when they came down to do battle with the Philistines, and you remember the story of David and Goliath, well, the Misraelites have their own version of that story. Right up to the part with all the people cowering in fear, it's pretty much the same as the Israelite story. But then David comes out of the crowd and says, I will go and fight this giant. And David went on to the field of battle with 5 smooth stones and his sling. And Goliath said, what is this? Am I a dog that you send a child out to fight me? And David began to put a stone into his sling. And Goliath said, look, son, just go home. I don't want to hurt you. But Goliath put the stone in the sling, and he slung the sling, and the stone went flying through the air. And it missed Goliath by 30 yards. So he put a second stone in and slung that, missed again by a country mile. Put the third stone in and came this close. The fourth stone, he was getting really nervous, so he slung it backwards into the crowd of the Israelites. And the people saith, get that stupid kid away from us. And Goliath came closer, and David had only 1 stone left. And Goliath saith unto the boy, go home, son. I don't want to hurt anybody today. But David slung the 5th stone, and it hit the ground 10 yards in front of Goliath, and bounced up and hit Goliath on the kneecap, just above the bronze greave protecting his shin. And Goliath saith, ouch! And was greatly irritated, and lifteth up his mighty sword, and he did smite David, and did cleaveth him asunder. And all the Misraelites said, we told you this wouldn't work. And they bowed down to the Philistines and begged to become their slaves. You get the idea? We have this book that says to us, victory, triumph, hope, trust in God. There is something in the human spirit that says, oh, we don't trust God. And in the New Testament, the story goes on in the same way. In the Misraelite Bible, when Joseph found out that Mary was pregnant, he didn't believe that he was the father. But instead of taking Mary as his wife, he went to see Maury Povich. And he said, Maury, we need to get a DNA test. And Maury had the test, and saith unto Joseph, the child is not yours. And Joseph saith unto Mary, take a hike. And on one occasion, the women brought little children to Jesus to bless them. And Jesus saith unto the women, get those little brats away from me, and make them shut up. You see that? We have a story of a God who says, trust me, I will bring strength out of your weakness and brokenness. I will give you victory. Trust me for the future. And yet there is this alternate book that exists that says, don't trust God. God will let you down. Now, how do I know that such a book exists? Well, it's simple. I meet people every day who read it and who live their lives as if God does not have a beautiful future for them. They live their lives as if everything is falling apart and God is not going to create a beautiful new world. And that's not what we believe. The Bible is the story of victory. The Bible is the story of hope for humankind. And I'm going to say something now, which I hope won't be upsetting to people, but I've been goaded on by my recent discussion groups. I do not receive the Bible as an historical, or a literal, or a scientific document. I receive the Bible as a profession of faith about who God is and how God acts in our lives. And since I don't receive it as historical, I ask the question, then who and what are these stories about? And the answer is this: the story of the crossing of the Red Sea and water from the rock in Rephidim and the defeat of Goliath. Those aren't historical events. Those are the events of my life. Those are the events that each one of you is going to encounter in your life this week. The Bible is your story. You have come to the Red Sea and you have the choice. Trust God and go forward, or join the Israelites and say, this isn't going to work. You have all been in the desert. The desert of grief, or sickness, or disappointment, or sin. And when you get into that desert, the story of your life is within the Exodus, with Moses who comes to the rock and the God who says, there is water in the driest place for you. And you never give up hope, and you never stop trusting God. And we have all come into our own valley of Elah and faced the giant. It's not an old story. It's what's going to happen to you in the week or the month which is to come. You are going to stand and face Goliath. Are you going to have victory? Or are you going to give up and die? We are the people of the book. We only know one way to go, the way to victory, the way to triumph, the way to glorious trust in a God who is beautiful and loving and gracious. As a church, we have some little challenges to meet in the weeks to come. You know that tomorrow is World AIDS Day, and our hearts are broken by the devastation wrought by that disease. In African nations where half of the adult population is HIV positive, and children by the tens of thousands are orphaned, someone might look at that and say, that is a giant we cannot defeat. Church is there. Through your givings to Presbyterian World Service and Development and Presbyterians sharing, we say the day is coming when we will know a world without AIDS. And we are caring for those little children whose parents have died. And we are supporting their older brothers and sisters who are now raising them, or their grandmothers and their grandfathers who are raising them. We are ministering to them, and we shall conquer, because that's who we are. And when we look at world hunger or world poverty, the Israelites would say, you can't do anything about that. Back off.